Hello, welcome to Clarity and Brevity. Today I'm joined by David Filson, who is the Senior Interim Minister at Christ Presbyterian Church and Christ Presbyterian, what's the academy?
Christ Presbyterian
Academy. And he's also Professor of Apologetics and Systematic Theology at Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia. Now there's a lot there that we could follow up on as we think through apologetics. One of the things that strikes me is we're all the same type of people, and that Christ came as the second and last Adam, and that there's a sense of understanding in all of us. Maybe you could talk about whether it be Romans 1, maybe the sense of sensus divinitatis. How could you unpack some of that?
Yeah, I was in London this past summer speaking at the Catalyst Conference for the International Presbyterian Church, and my wife and daughter got to go over with me, and we got to tool around Oxford and London. And if you've ever been in London, you've been on the subways, there are all these signs and recordings, mind the gap, because when you get to the edge of the platform and the actual subway car, there's a gap. You could get your foot stuck in there and trip or twist your ankle or whatever. Mind the gap. And I think traditional apologetics brings you up to a certain point, appealing to a supposed neutrality of facts and a neutrality of the interpreters of those facts, be it a believer and an unbeliever. And maybe the believer is appealing to the facts of creation, trying to make a hopefully high probability argument for the existence of a theistic being. And then what you do, you get that far, and then the gospel call is just mind the gap, kind of hop over that gap. I've got you as far as I can get you with these evidences and so forth, looking at them on the basis of the agreed upon neutrality of our reason and the neutrality of these facts. Now let's just mind the gap and skip on over the gap into the Christian train here, the Christian subway car. And what we want to do here with apologetics is to say, no, we actually have a more hopeful prospect for the apologetic task here, and it is this. According to Romans 1:18-32, every human being not only knows that there is a divine power of some sort, or as you read that you talk about the religious nuns today, about 14% of religious nuns, N-O-N-E-S, those who say I hold to no religious kind of thing, about 14% of them claim to be, according to Pew Research, about 14% claim to be agnostic or atheist, but about 74% claim to be spiritual. And what they tend to mean by that is that they feel a connection to something bigger. Now that may mean purpose, or they feel connection to their relatives who have gone before them. They want to feel connected to them, or they feel connected to some sort of universal, power or some such thing. Where we begin in apologetics here is something more hopeful than the supposed neutrality of man, hoping we can build a high probability argument for the possibility of a generic theistic being existing and then say, now just hop over the gap. But to realize that every human being we encounter is created in the image of God. And according to Romans 1:18-32, knows this God in whose image they are created. They run from it, they suppress it, not because there's a lack of evidence, but out of a prior commitment to wickedness, Paul says. And if I acknowledge that God is, then I'm accountable to that God. I want nothing to do with that. So I suppress what I know to be true. But you can't suppress what you don't have. And so the unbeliever is suppressing that which is within them, namely, as Calvin says in Institutes 1:1-3, you'll see this language used primarily in those sections of the Institutes, really in 1:1-3, chapters 1-3. He'll use language like, by virtue of being created imago Dei, or the image of God, man is possessed of the sensus divinitatis, not a spark of divinity, like Yoda in Empire Strikes Back, luminous beings, are we not this crude matter? Not a spark of divinity, but the sense of divinity, an awareness that God is who he says he is. He uses similar language such as the cognitio insita Dei, the implanted knowledge of God, the semen religionis, the seed of religion, which is similar to Augustine, who lived from 354 to 430 in Confessions 1:1, O Lord, you've made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in thee. That is the hope. That's what we're working with, and that ought to excite us and give us great encouragement as apologists, that we are engaging with someone who by their very creation, though they suppress it, and they are impacted by the noetic effects of sin, and they are dead in trespasses and sins, nonetheless, what we are working with is a human being who cannot escape the fact that by virtue of being created in the image of God, are they themselves walking, talking, living, breathing revelation of the God in whose image they're created. And so we appeal to that. That's actually our point of contact. Our point of contact is not supposed neutrality that we both come to, looking at neutral facts that may or may not point to some divine being possibly existing, but rather we are coming to someone who is inescapably created in the image of God, and by virtue of being self-aware, they are aware of a self created in the image of God, because it's the only kind of self there is. We want to help them see that that's who they are and stop running from it, stop suppressing it, stop trying to hide from that and reject that, because that's where freedom can be found, of course. So I think that's really a hopeful apologetic. You know, the old story around here, when Van Til would walk into class and on the last day of the semester to give the exam would write the German word Anknüpfungspunkt on the board, say write an essay on that point of contact. In other words, our connecting point is such a hopeful connecting point with natural man. It's embedded in each of us as created in the image of God, and in the apologetic task, we are appealing to someone who actually, though they suppress the truth of God, they are themselves revelation of the truth of God. I think there's a lot of hope in that. I think that's truly consistent with Calvin in Book 1 of the Institutes in terms of epistemological consistency between the way that we do apologetics here and a truly Calvinian approach to Calvin's theory of knowledge, Calvin's epistemology. I think that's really consistent. I think that's what Van Til was trying to tease out and to build and to advance. And I just think it's a hopeful approach to apologetics, and I think it's the approach that truly 1 Peter 3:15-16 honors Christ as Lord in our hearts as theologians, as apologists and theologians.